This is the 2030.
Yalla, 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 yalla.
Joining us on the 2030 is the incredibly talented Saudi artist, Manal Aldowayan. Manal is representing Saudi Arabia at the Venice Biennale with a multimedia installation entitled Shifting Sands, a Battle Song, showing from the 20th of April to the 24th of November, 2024. She is one of Saudi Arabia's most significant contemporary artists working internationally. Born in Dhahran in Saudi Arabia and currently living in London, she works between the two countries. Her work, which spans various mediums including photography, sound, sculpture, and participatory practice, interrogates traditions, collective memories, and the status and representation of women. Manal's work has been exhibited regionally and internationally in the most prestigious institutions such as the Guggenheim, the Louvre, the British Museum, and many others. Welcome, Manal.
Ahlan sahlan. Thank you, Hannah.
Manal, this is a pleasure. So your background, your educational background is in computer science. How did you get into art?
I originally wanted to study art, but there was no art industry in the area I lived in the region, the whole of the Middle East. There was, of course, in Iraq, Cairo, Syria, but when I grew up, it became war zones. And so in general, there were no institutions, museums, galleries, collectors. And so when I finished high school and approached my family and said I wanted to study art, they're like, and to do what? And so in my mind, I just wanted to get out. I wanted to go to college. So when my father recommended that the future is computers, go study that, I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so I have a master's degree in computer science, but always at my heart, I wanted to be an artist. And while I was doing my master's degree, I used to take courses in the evenings at art schools, just thinking, at least I'll feed my soul while I'm doing other things. Never thinking of myself as an artist, never calling myself an artist. And it took me a very long time to do that. And eventually, I started making art. I had my first exhibition at the end of the year from my first master's degree in 2003. And that was sort of that you can still do art even if there's no museums in your neighborhood or there's a global kind of presence for an artist that is very different than a local skill. And so I started thinking about, I started making art more and more and participating in shows until in 2010 I quit my job and decided to be a full-time artist. And that's when I called myself an artist. I also got a master's in contemporary art in the public sphere from the Royal College of Art. And yeah, that's a journey of education. But I don't regret my computer science background. Scientific background is very important for every woman. I think that it's helped me understand a lot more things that I needed as an artist than an art degree would have ever taught me.
Can you tell us what it's like to represent Saudi today after that journey at the Biennale? And, tell us kind of what are you showing the world there?
The Venice Biennale is sort of a pinnacle of your career moment for many artists. And it is a very complicated platform where nationhood is addressed and it comes face to face with contemporary art and the language of visual art. To be nominated to represent your country is to be asked as an artist to bring the language of visual arts to a specific location and express what your country is going through at this contemporary moment. And for me, it was a great honor to be chosen to do this, given what kind of art I've been doing throughout my career. It's not very nationalistic. It's not the safe kind of artist that a person would approach. But I think this is the contemporary moment of my country to be selected to represent in Venice Biennale.
So what do you think that selection, considering what you just said, says about Saudi Arabia?
I don't know what it would say about Saudi Arabia. I guess it's what you interpret and what you see, because you can always look at the pavilion. And I've had this, somebody approached me at the pavilion and said, it's a very beautiful artwork, but would this be allowed to be shown in your country? And so, there's a different reading from a different person every time somebody enters the pavilion and really engages with the ideas that are presented. Shall I tell you what the artwork is about? So the artwork is titled Shifting Sounds, a Battle Song. نطقت الرمال فتحرك الصوت. That's what it's called in Arabic. And I don't translate literal translations always. I give them, I don't think translation works in this kind of situations. Anyway, the artwork is multimedia artwork installation. It has 3 layers. One is the sonic art. So there's a sonic element with sound, and I can go into detail with that. Then there is also the participatory element, which is something I've been doing in my practice where I engage the community to build artworks with me over my career. And finally is the soft sculpture, which is the physical form of the artwork that I presented. And the 3 elements combine to create a landscape that speaks about the status of women today, specifically Arab, and more specifically Saudi women, and how they are portrayed, and the stereotypical language that is being used constantly to describe the Arab woman. And I present a response in the Venice Biennale, and I speak to the global audiences there and say that women have been definitely marginalized by using this kind of language, but the damage is even larger when self-determination, especially for me, myself as an artist, because in the end, this is an artwork that represents my personal experience, that self-determination has been very difficult when you're in constant battle with a conversation that you're trying to defend yourself against all the time. You don't have the time to stand back and reflect and decide, this is where I am, this is who I am, this is what I want to be.
So what did you hear? What did the women tell you? As far as I understand, you connected with over 1,000 Saudi women in Khobar, Jeddah, and Riyadh in a participatory manner. First of all, that sounds like a lot of curation. I would love to hear a little bit more about that and how you kind of were able to gather these stories and what kinds of stories came out of these workshops.
For the workshop, to prepare for it took us about 6 months. There are 3 workshops, each a few hours long, in 3 major cities in Saudi Arabia. To prepare for them, I had always had a dream to do group singing. I've been thinking about group singing for many years. It's just what song, what sound, how to perform it. And it remained in my heart for many years. And when the Venice Biennale opportunity came, I thought this is the moment to do something like this. And I also went back into my archive and thought about a sound that I heard when I was working in Saudi Aramco as an employee for 10 years. I flew out to the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia in the south, Rub al Khali. I was traveling with the geology group. I was a member, and we had tried to move and shift the sands of the empty quarter as a huge group. We were about 30 people, and we sat at the edge of the dune, pushed the sand. Once it turns into a waterfall, it started to make a booming hum. And that remained with me. That remained with me. And I thought about it constantly. And I thought, most women that I've encountered over the years have associated themselves to nature, especially in poetic language. And this is a self-determination language that exists outside of mass media. And, calling yourself palm always, the palm tree is mother, and describing your body as an ocean, thinking about the toughness of rocks. And this is the kind of language that I encountered a lot traveling across my country and within my own family. And so I thought I would love these women to harmonize with the sound of the sand dunes. And so I flew out with my team to the empty quarter with the help of the Minister of Culture, Royal Commissioner Alula, people in Aramco, and we spent the day looking for that sound. I almost lost my studio manager to a sand dune, but Came out intact and we captured the sound. We eventually took that sound to the three cities where I met. We just posted online. So how did we gather these women? Is we announced it online on the Ministry of Culture's Instagram. That's it. And for example, Riyadh, within 2 hours, we had 350 registrations. And I was very, very scared because how do you control 350 women and girls? And so I asked Mr. Culture to shut down that link because, crowd control and really creating an emotional moment and an engaging moment. You can't have out of control numbers, but anyway, we did. And so 1,000 women showed up in different places. And the places that we decided to do these workshops were women-only spaces. And this is something that I use in my language. And I talk about the counter public, which is where I think a lot of women miss out this energy of women-only spaces and, looking at what stereotypical books and media and how they describe these spaces are oppressed and sad. But in reality, women-only spaces are very empowering. You have multi-generational knowledge, an exchange. Your body exists without a gaze, a male gaze. Your voice has its space. So anyways, women-only spaces is where we decided to do these workshops. And it was the spaces that were given to me for free when I was much younger, 20 years ago, doing my participatory workshops when I was an unknown artist, and the community of women just said, come, you're our daughter, we'll help you out. They didn't know what contemporary art was. They didn't care. They just wanted to support me. And so I went back to them as a gesture of gratitude. So I did one in a charity association, Kubar, at Fatat al-Khalij. I did one at a vocational center in Riyadh, which was a Nahda Society. And in Jeddah, I decided to do it in a new space called Jameel Arts Center, Hay Jameel. And that is a space for art. I arrived at those participatory sessions with my desert sound and headphones, and I asked the women to harmonize by humming. And once they started to hum, I felt like I felt like that their mouths are closed, and I wanted them to open. And so they started going, ah, and I was like, okay, no, this is out of control. During that workshop, I had actually asked them to write a poem or write a statement to the woman on their right, to the woman on their left, and to themselves, a letter to themselves. And to imagine that these words that they're writing are the words that the poet in a traditional Arabic dance would say to his dancers on his right and left, and they would repeat his poetic lines. And these dances, usually in Saudi Arabia, they're called battle dances, or they have a legendary history of preparing for battle, but now they're used as celebratory dance. So that was the scope that I asked them, and they wrote incredible things. And so I thought, let me grab one of these and ask the girl or the woman who wrote it to say it out loud, and the whole room would repeat it. And that was where the success happened in the participatory session. It was very powerful, energetic. The women that read their quotes read them alone and then heard it repeated to them. So this was sort of the structure of the participatory sessions. And of course, there's post-production afterwards, where we took the sounds and turned them into a sonic piece. There was post-production for their drawings and statements, because some people didn't know what to write. So I told them, just draw them. And people drew incredible art. So I decided to use this. All of this shows you that in participatory art, the element of risk, experiment, and coincidence are very, very important, and you have to allow space for it. And because of that, I have an artwork in the Venice Biennale that is very, very powerful.
Can you give us some examples of some of the things that you heard and what they told you?
I can't tell you the examples in full because most of them were really long letters and statements. And when I chose for them to be read in the sessions, I highlighted the part so that it becomes a chat more than an essay reading. So I received letters from girls telling me this is the first time they ever write a letter to themselves, and they felt gratitude for that. There were statements that were written that they didn't. I remember this beautiful. I'll quote it as like, I didn't know I needed these women until I came to this room. And so this is a girl writing about the experience of sitting next to other women and expressing the same thing about solidarity with the sisterhood, I guess. And there were a lot of saying, know your voice, power to you. Little girls, 12-year-old girls, let me be. Thank you, I don't need your help, or things like that. It's very, very sweet and simple. And then there were drawings, and there were stunning drawings. There are artists that came and attended from all over the kingdom. I had people in Jeddah that drove 4 hours from Taif to attend the workshop and drove back on the same day. I was very, very grateful to them. I'm grateful for the response that I got when I asked for them to stand side by side with me.
So your practice in general and things I've seen really interrogates traditions, collective memories, and the representation of women. And I would love to hear just a little bit more about how that came through in this art piece.
Collective memory, although I do address collective memory, or in the sense that the way women are represented. So in my practice, I've been using media, so newspapers, and images of newspapers. I've collected them over the years. Back when, for example, my local newspaper had a red line, you're not allowed to put a picture of a woman in the newspaper. And I would collect all the images of how did they represent women then? So it was Black shapes, always in groups, never with identifying features or names. Another project I had done that was called State of Disappearance. Another one called Crash, which looks at women dying in car crashes, but not assessing the crash itself, but just looking at the media and how it covered it, where it was not allowed to mention women's names. So they thought it was better to mention the whole crash details and everybody attending to it and their names, except the woman that actually died in the crash. And for me, that became sort of a language thinking about those kind of artworks where I look deeply into the idea of media representation and its impact on the collective memory of society. It makes it easier for society to dehumanize a segment like women. It would be easier to ignore their needs when they are not identified with names, they don't have a face, they don't have a form. And this translates to many, many other situations, but I'm just using it in Saudi Arabia. But you can talk about the whole concept of statistics and body count and how reporting on wars or climate change and how it reduces things to nothing. And so for me, definitely this artwork was about the collective memory of what the Arab and Saudi woman is today. What will the next generation think of me? And how do I see myself in the coming years? So I need to self-define and leave the language that sort of floats around me, the cacophony of media, I call it, that sort of surrounds me and tells me who I am.
Manal, you were talking about the next generation of women and of artists. These artists and these women are looking up to you now. You mentioned the Biennale is a seminal moment in a career. What would you tell, if you were able to speak with them directly, what would you tell them about pursuing a career in art and pursuing their dreams in art?
Art can be part of your life regardless of your career choice. So creative thinking and making has to be a lifestyle. And if you're a person that wants to express, then it is an amazing vehicle. Because for me, I've always been jealous of musicians and writers. I've always wanted to play an instrument. And imagine expressing yourself through music. How insane is that? And through natural talent. And I've never had that talent. I've tried. Also writing, just putting together words and bringing somebody onto a journey and to evoke emotions, to tell a story through that takes me forever to write something. It's very difficult for me. So if you are surrounded with creative thinking in your being, in your existence, then if you are meant to be an artist, then that's the journey you have to take. But it's a very difficult one. So I wouldn't recommend it unless, it is, I cannot live unless I do it. In art school, I remember inviting, I had an open studio. It was called the Arab Art Salon. So we would gather every week in my studio, all the Arab artists in London that were in their master's degree programs. And we'd have conversations, and we invited different speakers. And at one point, we invited market leaders, like the head of, an art fair, the head of an auction house. So it was about five different directors of these important places, and they came to speak to us as artists. And one of the things that they said, that in this room, only one of you will continue to be an artist. There's chances of 1% or 10%, I forgot the percentage, but it was basically very few of you will continue as artists. But that doesn't mean it's the end. It's because they all had studied to be artists, but they never made art. What they did is they moved into the art world. And so, an art career does not just mean making art, is also representing as a gallerist, curating, researching art history. You can be, so many things. Restorer, you restore old paintings, or you're a keeper of artwork. So, when my artworks get acquired and go to an institution, I hope the person that receives them is a true artist and loves the work and the expression and takes care of it for the next 100 years, for the next generation. So I say to whoever really loves art and thinks I'm creative and I would love to do this, learn everything, be highly educated, stay curious, and rigorous in your love for contemporary art or modern art, or whatever it is that you, or theater or performance, but really be obsessed. And then different things can happen when you're that passionate, and you're not worried about. Also, you have to have financial stability. So have a job, learn how to earn money, learn how to save money, because art school doesn't teach you about business, or so it's very good for you to work in a place that teaches you some of those skills, writing a good email, putting together a good Excel. So, it's just layers and layers. An artist is not just born out of an art school or a desire to be an artist.
I think your art offers a very innovative critique of some of the change that's been happening in Saudi Arabia. And I'm thinking of older art that you've done in addition to Shifting Sands and what was at the Biennale. But I'm thinking of the series of photos of women, the scrolls with text from religious books and other things. And I feel like this critique of change really does highlight that there has been a shift. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the shift that may be taking place at the moment and how that feels to live through it.
So I like to think that my art is not a tool for critique, but rather posing questions to the viewers. So that I would love for people to come in, see my artworks, walk out and have a discussion, not a conclusion of my statement. I'm not giving you a statement and here, take it and go. In reality, I want to come in and think, what is she trying to say? No, I don't think she's trying to say that. Maybe this. Is it this? Is this what she's talking about, or is it that she's talking about? Maybe both. So I really love to have people experience questions in viewing my artworks. As for my work sort of being contemporary to the moment where it's made and reflects. So, for example, you mentioned very, very old photographs are made about 25 years ago that represented women in jobs when only 3% of women were working. I was also working. And this artwork was very close to my personal experience as an employed woman. There was a debate in newspapers in Saudi and also in our Shura Council about what jobs suit women's nature. And so this was sort of a response or a question asking who decides what suits my nature as a woman, and what really suits my nature as a woman, really, as a job. And I looked around me and I saw women doing incredible things on the ground, not theoretical, and invited them to pose as a participatory act to document this moment. These artworks now, I think, are considered historical. Everything that I had discussed in them is now standard. I think the job market for women has gone up to 30 something percent, which is insane, from 3% to jump like that. But definitely half the society is now being employed. Women are being more financially independent. They are more engaged with society. They are represented in decision-making spaces. So historical. These artworks are historical. And every time I make works, the same happens to it. So it isn't really a critique, but it is a document. And I always think that a society or a culture or a nation or people have their historians that write books and put them on shelves. Then you have the journalists that sort of write the day-to-day, and that's where you can really look into the archives of journalism to find out about history. But I think art also fits into this little niche between these two as a cultural language that also documents a moment in a society. It doesn't necessarily answer anything. It takes, you look at a nation's art over the years and you'll understand what's happened to this nation through just visual language. And Venice is a little bit like that because it's one of the oldest biennales. It's been going on for 120 years. A lot of countries have presented artworks every single biennale. And if you look at their representation, the stories, I can give you a side story of Germany, for example. A few years back, the artist that came in found out that the marble that was installed in their pavilion, flooring, was chosen by Hitler himself, and he had asked that put marble in this space. And so he just destroyed the marble. This is very interesting narrative. So that was his exhibition, the space with the marble completely, uprooted and broken. And you can imagine what kind of artwork was presented when Hitler actually came to visit. And so, art is really a visual language that documents cultural history.
The status of art in the Arab world today, is there something that it needs? Is there some accelerant that can be poured onto it that makes it develop faster or in a better way? Is there any way that it can be, does it have everything it needs to succeed now?
I would rather pour something onto the art scene that slows it down today. Because there's a lot to be said about an art movement that grows organically, thoughtfully, and with multi-layered emotions and knowledge and contributions. So I know there are examples of countries that have presented a contemporary art movement in just one decade, like very quick. And built, here's the museum, here's the collector, here's the art fair, here's the auction. And it was shaky. It doesn't have the stability that, a very, very solid bottom layer of artists that are thinking and making, hanging out together, and then another layer of artists that are actually being represented and selling, and then another layer of celebrated artists that are in museum collections and preserved their art is preserved as a language that represents that institution, and so on and so forth. So for me, I think the arts world right now is in Saudi Arabia specifically is very interesting because I have lived in many countries where art is the focus, including the UK. And, I can see how government can impact changes in the way art is made and how artists are treated and how schools are funded. But also I can see I've lived in countries where it was all subsidized. It was all money was pumped into it and in an intention to just let's get on with it. And I saw it not really move forward the way that everybody imagined. So I think Saudi Arabia has a good approach. I love that we have 3 art historians that were appointed to the Shura Council, Dr. Mahasinan, Dr. Iman Jibrin, and Luna Khazandar, and all women. There are museums being planned, but the collections are being built before they're being built. So this is very important that, there's an understanding that once the museum opens, it's not like we have to borrow artworks from whatever and try to fill the walls quickly. No, there's a considered, thoughtful approach to this museum represents, for example, spices. This museum represents clothes. And there's a deep collection that tells you a history, tells you a story. It's not just like everything packed into one building. I also find art education was very much lacking. I think that is something that we're building on now through the scholarships program that's been going on for 5 years. So, you go learn abroad and come back, which I think is problematic, but you do what you got to do, which is what I did. To go study in Eurocentric universities or North American centric universities or French. It's very hard to understand your history when it's their history that's being presented. But we do have art schools. I know that there's like small pockets, but I think this needs more focus. Academic writing and thinking around art will definitely enhance the quality of art that is made, the conversations, the way collections are built in a nation. So academics, art historians, I guess, or students, PhD students, questioning and thinking very deeply about art is important to everyone. And this is happening. I do have a lot of young students and elder students contacting me for their PhD research. And I've been collecting this as an archive in my studio. And I'm telling you that up until 2 years ago, the writing was very surface about contemporary. I was just introducing what I'm doing or introducing what other artists that I like or know in Saudi Arabia, what they're doing, but nothing in depth. Past 2 years, the academic papers that I've read from different students have been brilliant and really, really inspiring. And I learned things about myself by reading their research. So yeah, academia and art need to be friends. What else? And then of course a market. Yeah, people need to buy the artist's artwork. Otherwise, how do you pay the rent? And if you can't pay rent through your art, that means you have to get a job. If you get a job, that means you can't be making as much art, and you cannot be fully, immersed in your creativity. And so, an art market is very hard to develop, and this will take time. It's a language of retail and customer. I don't know it and I don't think about it a lot, but it's there and it's definitely what supports me as an artist. And I think that's integral part of an art ecosystem.
Maybe one more question. You just said we need good artists. So obviously we're speaking to one of the best, but I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about people who have inspired your work or people that you admire and people that are working within the industry in Saudi and around the world today.
Admire and inspire are two different paths. So I admire, there's a lot of people I admire, very brilliant. One of them is you, Hannah, and there's many people I admire. I admire my curators at the Venice Biennale, and Maya Khalil and Jessica Sarasi. They're brilliant. The way they think, the way they introduce ideas, and how their writing is very interesting. And I can go on forever because there's a lot of people that I admire. People I've worked with around the world. As for inspiration in my studio, and usually, and I've been asked this so many times throughout my career, I always have a different answer. Today, I tell you that definitely I can say I'm inspired by the written novel, poetry, historical curiosity, like through archaeology. I like the mystery, the filling of the gaps, and I feel like archaeologists are very close to artists in the sense that they have to come up with weird things just to, complete a story or use their imagination. These are things that really feed into my practice, music also. And most of these things, like reading an excellent text or a novel or a poem, these are they are tools that allow my mind to create images as it likes. So it does not give me the image ready. And so I have to imagine the scene that I'm reading, or if I hear a beautiful song, the colors that come into mind. So this is what I think. These are tools that activate the brain for me, and not everyone. Some people jog for creativity. I don't do jogging, but I do love to listen to a good, beautiful song or read a very, very powerful text, and it triggers something in me. And I don't know how, but it moves me. And sometimes when I'm preparing for a new solo show or a new project, commissions not so much, but when I'm doing my personal work, I spend a lot of time in my library. I just look through pages, read things, have music on, and then see what happens. And usually there's something that triggers me, like it activates me, gives me a feeling. And I think, let me look into this, and then an artwork happens. But I think I admire a lot of women and men that surrounded me throughout my career.
You mentioned the Biennale being the pinnacle of a artist's career. It is, but do you have ideas or a vision for what you'd like to do in the coming years as an artist, as a person, as a woman?
Yeah, I sat down with my studio team, for a final lunch in Venice after the opening, after everyone left. And I told them, because you have to remember that same year, not only Venice happened, I also opened 2 solo shows in Alula. I did a performance at the Guggenheim. I've not only run 3 workshops for Venice, but I ran 18 workshops for my land art project, Oasis of Stories, at the Wadi Al Fan at the Royal Commission in Alula. And so it was an intense year. And so I looked at them and I was like, okay, so all the things that I had dreamed of have been accomplished. What do we dream of next? And so we all started, throwing things there and here. And I think I would love to look at film. This is another form of expression. Because of my experience with the group singing, I love the idea of sonic art and what sound can evoke. So I would like to play more with music. This is sort of building on my jealousy of people who play musical instruments. At least now I know there's a digital way to play instruments. I can do that. I have a master's in computer science, guys. And I think for my dreams, I have a bigger one that is still cannot happen, but it will. Is that to have a major museum show in my own country. So I want them to build a museum first, and for me to have that show And I think that would be a really nice dream to have fulfilled.
Amazing discussion. Manal Aldowayan, one of the world's leading contemporary artists hailing from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Manal, so cool to speak with you. Thank you for joining us on the 2030. It was an honor.
Honor was mine. Thank you, guys.